morning. I'm Barbara Gahn-Mueller, and I am so proud to welcome each of you to our second episode of Peace and Working Together from the book Prophet, the Hatmaker's Son. I've had the privilege of knowing each of you personally, and the work that you are doing is so valuable today. And today we're going to have a special guest view of Ambassador Chaudhry, which I will get into pretty soon. But right now, I just want you to know how much we appreciate each of you. And Dennis, I'm looking right there in your face because I see you must be making a little bit of noise. And when there's a little bit of noise, whoever is making that noise gets on the screen. So I'm going to go back to gallery view. Mute yourself, please, or I will mute you. That would be such an important component. Dr. Ambassador Chaudhry, do not mute yourself. You know, I was reading again in our latest issue of the magazine, and it said, Prophet the Hatmaker's Son is the inspiring true story of Robert Mueller, a man who lived through the atrocities of World War II and then dedicated his life to peace. Gillies, who will be on today, the author, Douglas Gillies, brings to vivid life the remarkable achievements and the astonishing story of a great global citizen. He spent 40 years at the United Nations. When he saw the atrocities of World War II, and as Laurie Marshall called me today, and she said, "Can you believe we're going through the same thing today with the Russians shooting their cousins in Ukraine?" And this morning, as I read the New York Times, I cried. I cried out loud. Why are we still experiencing the atrocities of war? As I read that article in the New York Times, I had to stop. I had to stop because it was so vivid, so real. And that's what this book, Prophet the Hatmaker's Son, is doing for all of us. They're showing us why we can't let history repeat itself. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why I invited you to hear Ambassador Chaudhry today, because he knows how to turn us into a culture of peace from a culture of war. And then as I read again, these words of Robert Mueller experienced the devastation of 2 world wars. And he was a little boy when the French were shooting the Germans. His grandfather changed nationalities 5 times without leaving his home. Come on, let's get onto a world that works for all and use our resources to feed the hungry and to save nature. When Robert was alive, he said, the biggest war we have right now is the war on nature. And I believe we are experiencing that. That's why so many people are working on climate, trying to make sure that we understand that climate is part of our future, part of our grandchildren's future. One night while standing in a dark battlefield, weeping for all the young people whose lives had been squandered, he swore that he would devote his life to peace. Robert left everything behind and joined the United Nations in the 3rd year of its existence and spent the next 40 years following that dream. He never gave up. His enthusiasm and optimism led him to become known as the Prophet of Hope. And that is why his book is called Prophet. When Douglas Gillies named the book Prophet the Hatmaker's Son, many people said, why did you call it Prophet? Why didn't you call it Robert Mueller's biography? He said, because as I interviewed people for 3 years and I traveled around the world, I heard people tell me that Robert was the prophet we've been waiting for. And he said it because Robert believed in peace, and we all believe in peace. That's why we're here. You wouldn't be here if you didn't believe that it's possible in our lifetime. And so today, without further ado, I welcome you. If you want to listen to Douglas Roach, Ambassador Douglas Roach, episode number 1, go to peacepodcast.org. And if you go there, you go to blog and you will be able to listen to Douglas Roach. I've heard it twice already. And each time I listen to it, I get more inspired. Joyce Wyckoff, the editor and magazine Peace Podcast, our Peace Community magazine is in the right-hand corner. And if anybody would like a copy and you don't have it, I can send you an electronic copy. Just put your email in the chat box and I'll send it to you immediately. Wow, without further ado, I have to introduce somebody that I have so much respect for. Ambassador Chaudry. Ambassador Chaudry received the second Robert Mueller Peace Prize. The first recipient was Ted Turner. Ted Turner said about Robert Mueller, Robert Mueller has had a very large positive influence on me. He has wonderful global outlook and a loving, kind-hearted attitude of forgiveness and understanding and patience. I have great admiration and respect for him. He's one of the greatest men to have come along in a long time. Following Ted Turner getting the first Robert Mueller Peace Prize for his work getting CNN and allowing the world to have firsthand knowledge of what's going on around the world, including wars, we now have the ability to become a global citizen without leaving our country and without leaving our seat in the front of the Zoom call or in front of CNN. With that, we were able to get through the atrocities of war and understand that we are part of the solution to the war that is facing us today, the potential. So I'd like to introduce Ambassador Chaudry. You notice I begin to smile. This is a man of optimism. This is a man of hope. This is a man who never gave up. For 40, I don't know how many years, but I would assume he's been there a long time because he is a permanent representative to the United Nations from Bangladesh. He has he received the Spirit of the United Nations Award. He is the founder of the Global Moment of Peace. He worked with U Thant, Robert Mueller. I mean, he is incredibly gifted in the field of peace. And today, without further ado, I'm going to take you through what Ambassador Chaudry says is a process. It's a process. We are the peace other people need, and we have to go from a culture of war to a culture of peace. Ambassador Chaudry, I welcome you. Thank you for being here today. And I'm going to ask it's going to be a little hard. I want to get the speaker view up. So if you don't make any noise or mute yourself, let me mute everybody because I want to have full screen for Ambassador Chaudry. So let me put you on mute. I think, Ambassador Chaudry, would you talk and let's see if we can get you on full screen?
No problem, whatever you want.
You're there. Yay. Thank you, Ambassador Chaudry. And without further ado, did I leave some things out about your life? Because your resume was so long, I had to print it down to a little tiny thing, but it was hard. Tell us what we left out and welcome.
Well, no, nothing you left out. That's okay. That was overwhelming, whatever you said. Very kind. Very kind.
Thank you.
So let's get down to the business.
All right, Ambassador, you're on. Tell us how to go from a culture of war to a culture of peace, and let us know what Robert Mueller meant to you, please.
Yes, I will be happy to say that and do that. But let me start by congratulating you on hosting this podcast, this episode of reading of the book Prophet. But I should tell you that the name of the book club, Peace on Earth Book Club, is so wonderful. It connects peace with the earth. And as you mentioned about Robert's reference to the nature and the earth and the climate change. So this is, I believe that this is the most appropriate name of the book club, the Peace on Earth Book Club. And I think you sustained that because number of people who got these flyers came back to praise that. And also they said the images put on the flyer was so beautiful. They loved the children with the T-shirts having the heart insignia on them. So that is one thing that struck me and many others. So I would like to say to you and I think Mr. Sanford, who prepared the flyer, Mr. Hinden, sorry. So I'm very, very appreciative of your work. Thank you. Let me mention that the book, it's not only tells the story of Robert, but it is written. Douglas Gillis has done the wonderful work. It's written like you get stuck to it. You are seeing parts of history unfolding before your eyes and before your mind. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I would recommend that everyone should read and reread. It's beautiful. I would like to say that in March, we observed the 99th birthday of Mr. Muller. And I had, after that occasion, I had sent a message to Ms. Muller saying that we should have a global committee of the friends of Robert Muller from various parts of the world to organize themselves to have an appropriate celebration for his 100th birth anniversary next year. So that is what I thought would be wonderful to organize. And so he is known all over the world, and he has many friends from many parts of the world. So it will be wonderful to bring them together to celebrate this great occasion next year. I would start by quoting one of the many wonderful quotes from Mr. Muller. And I keep on saying, because affectionately we all call him Robert, but I keep on saying Mr. Muller because our relations were so, to start with, he was at the big level of the United Nations, and I was just a new diplomat joining in. And so I think he embraced me with a lot of affection, but I kept on calling him Mr. Muller, and I will do that now also. And he said that I quote him, "The time has come for the implementation of a spiritual vision of the world's affairs. The entire planet must elevate itself into the spiritual, cosmic throbbing of the universe. I dream that all governments will join together to manage this beautiful earth and its precious humanity in peace, justice, and happiness." And these are wonderful. And as you showed during Senator Roach's episode about the book Happiness also. So that those are the wonderful things. And this is something that I refer to, and you very kindly mentioned about me receiving the second Robert Muller World Peace Prize. And there, at the occasion of my acceptance speech, I mentioned about him, and I'll read my own text so that there is no discrepancy. What I said in October 2020, that was the UN day when that was handed over, and there was a big occasion there. So I will say as follows, that I feel privileged to say that I knew Dr. Robert Muller and have been blessed by his idealism for the United Nations. The newly independent nation of Bangladesh gave me the responsibility of doing the groundwork for its membership of the UN, and that brought me to New York in 1972, 50 years ago. And the first senior official of the UN who welcomed me most cordially was Mr. Muller, who ended his formal work of the United Nations as Assistant Secretary General. He was always open to my occasional visits to his UN office without appointments, greeting me with his natural, warm-hearted smile. He would graciously respond always to my questions about substantive or procedural issues as a greenhorn diplomat in the UN's complex environment and politics. In all this, he exuded his love, respect, and devotion and commitment to the world body. Somehow, I would sense a similarity of my own persona in the spirited way of his working for the UN, a rare engagement to be found in today's United Nations community, I'm sorry to say. A Belgian by birth and a global citizen by belief, he knew the horrors of the World War II, of being a refugee, experiencing imprisonment, and was a member of the French resistance. Here, I see a similarity of the background with my own allegiance to the government in exile of Bangladesh to join the war of liberation for the independence of my motherland, abandoning my Pakistani diplomatic career and comfort. I was in reality a refugee like him and like many millions of fellow Bangladeshis who took refuge in neighboring West Bengal of India. I was, however, not imprisoned, but was sentenced to life imprisonment by a Pakistani court for treason as a derelict diplomat of my erstwhile country. My apologies for this diversion, thereby bringing in my own story. I am sure Mr. Muller would have loved to listen to this from me. With Mr. Muller's passionate encouragement, I, as Bangladesh's ambassador to the UN, proposed and negotiated a consensus resolution by the UN General Assembly in 1997, proclaiming the millennium year 2000 as the International Year of Thanksgiving. This was the first time ever that General Assembly voted unanimously in favor of a spiritual idea. That's why I started by reciting his quote in the first sense. For the restructuring of the world core curriculum, he is known worldwide as the father of global education. In active retirement, Dr. Muller brought in valuable leadership as Chancellor of the University for Peace, created by the United Nations in Costa Rica. Eternal worth of his daily quotations give us inspiration and encouragement to be a true global citizen. On the UN's 50th anniversary in San Francisco, Dr. Muller said, and I quote him, "I have been transformed by the United Nations. I am definitely grateful to the UN for having taught me that planet Earth is my home, that humanity is my family, and that it was worthwhile to devote my 40 years with enthusiasm and faith to the great objective for which the organization was truly created. In the face of colossal obstacles and short-sightedness of nations, the UN has created many miracles. The world's future requires a strengthened United Nations. It is now a matter of life or death for our Earth and humanity." End of quote. This is a wonderful quote to recite as I'm going to present my thoughts to you. So this is absolutely wonderful. And every word relates to today, the need of today. And it's really the point that UN is today in this current situation. It is really a life or death situation. United Nations has not been able to live up to the expectation of the world. And I think particularly I will mention this about the leadership. And we feel very sad for that. Anyway, I would like to say that as we were coming out of and now we are going into the Cold War again. And so we were thinking how to make peace more sustainable. This was towards the end of 1990s, last century. And we were inspired by the words in the UNESCO Constitution that if the war begins in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that bastion of peace should be constructed. So that is, we feel that this change of mindset, change of behavior is very important. And then there was a big global conference organized by UNESCO in 1989 at Yamoussoukro in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. And there, the conference was called the International Congress on Peace in the Minds of Men. And they came out sort of elaborating the concept of the culture of peace. And in 1996, I became the ambassador of Bangladesh to the United Nations. And one of the things that attracted me very immensely is the culture of peace. And I thought that this is something that we can all aspire for and believe it will provide the opportunity for the world to come out of the sort of bitter rivalry and the long-standing rivalry seen during the Cold War and the proxy wars. Now again, we see proxy wars going on in the context of the Ukraine war. So this is what we thought would be good. And I thought it should not stay as a concept being developed in one of the agencies of the United Nations, meaning UNESCO. I said it should have a profile in the United Nations at the highest level, at the highest highest body of the United Nations system, meaning the UN General Assembly. So in 1997, July, Kofi Annan has become the Secretary General only a few months before that. And I wrote to him, along with few other ambassadors, about instituting a new agenda item of the General Assembly called the Culture of Peace. And that is when it ran into bitter problem because of the countries of the West, the European countries, USA and others were not very favorable because it was, I think they were afraid that this culture of peace is intended by the developing countries to devalue the role of human rights in the United Nations. But the culture of peace concept has human rights built into it, basically. So that is when we had objection for the agenda item itself, but it was done, it was adopted, approved, and then in 1997, that same year, the agenda was included. We declared the millennium year, the 2000, as the International Year for the Culture of Peace. And then the Nobel Peace Laureates, living Nobel Peace Laureates, wrote to me and my country and saying that it's wonderful that we had the International Year, but to promote culture of peace is not enough. we have to have a longer term objective of promoting the culture of peace. And they said, and on the basis of their idea, in 1998, the next year, we adopted a resolution proclaiming the International Decade for the Culture of Peace and Nonviolence for the Children of the World. That was from 2001 to 2010. And then next year in 1999, we said, yes, we have the year, we have the decade, but what to convey to the people of the world? What to do? So then we started working on what is known as the UN Declaration and Program of Action on the Culture of Peace. So this is the booklet which contains the UN Declaration and Program of Action on the Culture of Peace. This the booklet you're seeing was issued in 2019 on the 20th anniversary, because the booklet was adopted in 1999, 13th of September. That is the date it was adopted by consensus. This is after the UN Charter on peace issues. I think this is the only document which has been accepted by consensus. And also, when it was adopted in the UN, we had 189 countries. But now we have 193 countries. But all of them have subsequent years expressed support to this document. And this is a document which transcends boundary, which transcends societies, the differences between societies, everything. It is all embracive, and it is, I should say, it is an eternal document. Here, I would like quickly to digress a little bit, because my faith in the United Nations is built on or based on some of the things that the UN has done for the world. And I believe that I carry with me always 4 booklets which inspire me continuously. Number 1 is, of course, the Charter of the United Nations. It is the fundamental booklet for all of us. Then I also carry with me the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. So that is, again, I believe, after the Charter. This booklet was published on the 70th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration on Human Rights in 1948. And we know about Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt's epic contribution to that. Then I have this one, and this booklet works on the 50% of humanity. It is the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And I believe that if the UN has, UN could implement everything in this booklet, we will be a better world today. This is the document, the convention. This is a treaty which talks about the elimination of discrimination against women. And we have with it, I have another booklet, same thing. This was issued by the UN Security Council, the Resolution 1325 on equality of participation by women in all decision-making issues on peace and security. And the 4th one is a world fit for children. This is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And that is very important. And 5th one, of course, is the Culture of Peace document. So these 5 documents, I believe, if implemented properly, can make the biggest transformation that we are looking for so many years. Now it is the 76th year of the establishment of the United Nations. And we have not been able to not only eliminate war. We seem to be encouraging war. Not we means United Nations, but the world, the countries of the world, or the philosophies or governmental narrow self-interest of the countries. And that is what disappoints me immensely. Let us say that people always ask me, what do you mean by the culture of peace? And there I say that in a simple word, culture of peace means when each one of us decides to live our lives in a peaceful and non-violent way. It is as simple as that, as an individual determination to be peaceful and non-violent. And that for that, I think we have to what we call go through a transformative process. And this transformative process is both, or I say also, not only individual, but also collective, and then institutional. We need to see change of mindset in the institutions also, because otherwise the global institutions, including the all-important World Bank or International Monetary Fund or NATO, they have to also believe in peace and the need for peace in the context of our lives. Because we should understand that the absence of peace takes away the opportunities that we need to enhance our life, to make progress in our societies. So that is the basic thing that we have been telling. And the booklet or the program of action and declaration starts by saying in the Article 1, the culture of peace is a set of modes of behavior, the ways of mindset, how to carry ourselves. And I say that we should not make peace a thing of distance or isolate peace. We always think world peace, I have nothing to do. But that is not true. Unless I am peaceful myself, I have no right to ask for world peace. And that is very important. I think sometimes we feel that our work or enthusiasm for peace is expressed when I go out in the street and sort of show a placard for peace and give slogans, and then we come back home, and then I see I am a very disrespectful person. I am violent myself in my verbal violence. So all these things has to go. So you cannot consider peace as something separate from you. It is to be lived in every day, every moment by all of us. And that will make peace sustainable, make the world a better place. And so this goes on. And interestingly, the Declaration on the Culture of Peace identified 5 actors who will be the lead, who will take the lead in promoting the culture of peace. Number 1, of course, the governments, the member states who have adopted this document. But when it comes to their nations or to their countries, they are very slow. They make all the pronouncement at the global level, at the United Nations. But when they're back home, the culture of peace is very, very insignificant, very, very marginalized in their attention. Because all governments are interested in continuing their political power. Win the election, do things which will keep them in power. And that power play takes away the focus on the culture of peace. Number 2, the UN has mentioned, and this is first time in a big way, about civil society, the role of civil society in promoting the culture of peace. And there I should say, civil society has done enormously wonderful. And like this event that we are talking about, the culture of peace. This is what, and many of you are here, the leaders in civil society activism. And that is very, very energizing. The civil society brought out a survey of the work for culture of peace in 2005, the midpoint of the decade for peace, culture of peace. And then 2010, they brought out another one as the decade came to a close. And all these things have shown us that mainly civil society has been keeping the flag of the culture of peace high. The governments or other actors have not done. And let me come to the others. Then third is, for the first time, the role of media has been identified by the United Nations. Civil society also has been given a very prominent role for the first time in the culture of peace document. And then comes the media, because today, and particularly in the context of social media, it is so relevant. Print media, visual media, electronic media, and then all these things are very important, play an important role in promoting the culture of peace. And then number 4 is individual. All of us, whatever is our profession, doctors, engineers, teachers, religious leaders, doesn't matter. We all can promote the culture of peace. It's not only the diplomats or the politicians or the UN personnel who have to promote the culture of peace. Every one of us, because it involves individuals. And then 5th is the United Nations, because it's the body which is adopting these recommendations, I think, felt that it expresses its humility by putting it down at the 5th level. But unfortunately, that humility has become a reality, because UN has also not done as much as is expected. It has not internalized the concept of the culture of peace in its decision-making. And that is very unfortunate. I wish we have been trying hard again and again to put the highest level, Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General, all the Under Secretaries General, to refer to the culture of peace. This is a tool available to the United Nations to promote peace. But we have not. We have gone to what I call the hard materials of peace, like peacekeeping, like mediation, like sending a commission of people. But the real software of peace is the change of the mindset. And that is very important. The behavior, modes of behavior has to change. And this is cultural. And let me end by highlighting this point through the need for the major role of education. Education is the fundamental objective. But I should say the booklet on the culture of peace has 8 areas of action. And number 1 starts with education. Second is human rights. Second is sustainable development. Third is human rights. And 4th is equality between women and men. All these things are there. But number 1 is education. But this education is not what we are getting it now. We are getting education in a very technical, mechanical way. We are not trying to influence children to talk about peace, live in a peaceful way, and sort of grow up, not only to shape their life, but also shape the future of the world. And that is what the education should be doing. This is what I call the education for global citizenship. And this world core curriculum that Robert presented has many of the elements of this kind of education that we need. Education built on the respect for the United Nations, respect for the mutuality and oneness of humanity. So all these things are very important. And that is what I believe that Robert's contribution to the world has been enormous and eternal. And it will continue to encourage us in coming years. And I think during his 100th anniversary, we should highlight this one in a major way, that he has contributed something which can really make a difference in this world. So that is very important. And so education, particularly for the young mind, because that is when the formative stage of minds come in. And young boys and girls should know that it is worthwhile to be peaceful and nonviolent, because that will enhance not only their lives, but the lives of the people of the world, and also change their attitude towards the planet Earth. So that is very important. So let me end here. Maybe there are questions which can be presented or comments, and I'll be very happy to address those in the best possible way. Thank you.
Boy, oh boy, the inspiration we got from you today, Ambassador Chaudhry. You know, Robert was called the prophet of hope. And during your call today and during your talk, I got an email and it said, Ambassador Chaudhry is now our prophet of hope. And Ambassador Chaudhry, I don't know if you could have a bigger compliment, but you are our prophet of hope. Your words today are in our hearts. And I agree with you when you said we have to be the peace. If we don't have that peace, we cannot go forward. I'm going to go to David after I give you one question, which is how can we order or find those documents that you brought to our attention?
Well, I believe most of these or all of these are accessible. I can send you the links. Please. And then you can print it out. Or if you want the hard copy of some of those which I have, at least this I can send you maybe 50 copies to you, Ms. Muller, and then you can share it with everybody who wants it. Or if you want it individually, send me your email address and then I will send it.
Thank you. What a generous offer. And I will take 50 of those because we do send out the hard copy of our magazine in addition to the a digital version of Peace Community Magazine. And Ambassador Chaudhry, I could go on for 20 minutes thanking you. And you deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. But I'm going to move right over to David Wick. David Wick, who introduced this beautiful culture of peace to Ashland, Oregon. He also is the president of the Rotary E-Club of World Peace. We have such noble people on this call today. David Wick, what is your question, or did you just want to, well, just whatever?
Well, thank you very much. And what a delight to see you, Ambassador Chaudhry. And I just wanted to say, as he mentioned in the beginning, about this is a spiritual evolution. And in my experience and with my great inspiration over the many years from Ambassador Chaudhry, Avon Madison, David Adams, and others who've been deeply involved with the whole concept of the culture of peace, and with the work here in Ashland and many other places. It really is fundamentally, it's about a mind shift. It's about a mind change because the behavior follows our thinking, and looking at the world, and so it's really coming down to, which I absolutely see, it is a spiritual revolution. That's the fundamental, because we're stuck in the 3D world. We're stuck in the concept of right, wrong, the dynamics of the light, the dark, and we need to move into evolution. So part of that absolutely is education, but how do we do that in a significant, broader way, the influence into the higher values, essentially, is what you're saying about living peace. So that's the challenge. I see that how we really, those of us engaged in this, how do we have to live it, but how do we, expand that? And we can, touch the spheres of influence that we have, and that's what we can do. We're not going to change the world, not going to reach Putin, etc. Directly, but the influence, that's the big question. How do we move it significantly from this point and make those changes? Thank you.
Thank you, David. This morning I was reading the New York Times, and I told you I was crying as I read it. And then I remembered I wrote an editorial, use your voice, use your words. I wrote an editorial to Rotary International, and I got the top billing on this editorial. It's called Make Lemonade. Thank you, Frank Burns, for your column. Could be worse in the issue before this. Daily, we are exposed to so much bad news, yet, as you wrote, negativity is contagious and doesn't allow us to hear about the positive, including all the accomplishments of Rotarians and other clubs around the world. We must tell the story of our work. For the world we want. Solving today's global problems begins with each of us, as Ambassador Chaudhry said today. Each of us begins to do the work that brings us to together. We rewrite the ending. And I want the ending to be one of peace. And that was in the Rotary magazine. Use your words, call them up, use your words, write letters to the editor. And this title of this was called Make Lemonade. That has nothing to do with war, but I think people understood when you give in a bunch of lemons, make lemonade. And I want you to be the voice for peace on our planet. Ambassador Chaudhry, is there something you'd like to add to this about education?
Well, I would like to also to add to the point that Mr. Week mentioned, because I believe that promoting the culture of peace has to be brought down, not by leaving it to the national leaders, but to the community leaders, to bring back to the community. And that is what their organization called Ashland Culture of Peace Commission is a wonderful model for the world to see how can you promote that is a kind of a philosophy from global at the UN level to bring to local. So global to local is the context in which their work continues. And I believe that is a model for all cities. There is a Mayors for Peace organization, headquarters in Hiroshima. And they have 8,000 cities as part of the 8,000 mayors who are part of this organization. And they last August, they had the review of their goal and objectives. And they added the culture of peace and the program of action on culture of peace as one of their top 3 objectives to work. And I think that's a wonderful thing for this local level, city level people to do, promote the culture of peace. And I believe when I talk to them or speak to them in any event, I will mention about Ashland Culture of Peace Commission as a model for them. That will be wonderful. But let me mention that education is
Ashland Culture of Peace Commission.
I think that's our next speaker, Desmond and Jerry Bergdorfer. But I want to agree with you, Ambassador. You're totally correct. When you go to Ashland, you not only see "make up my room" on the hotel door, it says "in peace." In peace. on the hotel door, on that little thing that hangs down doing nothing but saying, make up my room. Now they say, make up my room in peace. Think about the words. Think about the words. This is a time for peace. Jerry, you mentioned on the phone yesterday that you had something revealed to you as you read chapter 2, which we are working on today. Would you please tell us what you learned?
Yes, Barbara. First of all, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
First of all, thank you very much, Ambassador Chowdhury, for your focus on peace and the culture of peace. That was a very important message, and I'm glad this is recorded, Barbara, because I think that we need to share these kinds of messages. I would like to say several things to head off a discussion among all of us about how we actually wage peace. This chapter here, chapter 2, tells us about the horrors of war. May I just read just a little bit?
Please, yes.
From this book. It says, the book is talking about between wars, and it says, the celebration of peace was short as Europe slumped into a post-war depression. France's industrial corridor on the Belgian border was depopulated and devastated. Farmland has been carved into concrete canyons, and we are faced with barbed wire and sown with explosives. 3/4, listen to this, 3/4 of all French soldiers sent into action were listed as casualties. 2 million were missing or killed. 4.3 million were wounded. Across the English Channel, 1 million British soldiers did not return home, and 2 million needed rehabilitation. And it goes on to describe this. And so in this chapter, Robert gives you the understanding of how the culture of peace gets started with what is going on in each country, how we treat each other. And then we actually see the images of war in this book. And what is most important here, as Douglas introduces this concept, is Robert says, what are we going to do about it? And the most important thing that Robert has to say about peace is his own response to it. And then he joins the United Nations, and we see that one's own response to peace is important, but it's not enough, not in this time of war. And you sort of, what I have to say here is that the images of war, that we are seeing on our television invades the heart of every person on this planet. You once seeing the devastation, you once seeing these children in the maternity hospitals attacked, you can never forget that. And so I would like to say that I am inspired by your words and by the idea of the culture of peace, Ambassador Chowdhury, because the Visioneers International Network is setting to launch in October. And the title of our launch is Humanity's Golden Peace, the soul-sized meaning of peace, and that we are the peace builders. And we are intending to publish these visual images and the words that describe them of the meaning of peace to tens of thousands of people worldwide. And already we have leaders in 21 countries that are going to send this into their own networks. This is an international concept that we must act for peace. And in the Visioneers Project, we have something called the Wall of Stories. And in this Wall of Stories, each of the people who has an award has an incredible story to tell about the various aspects of peace. Because as you mentioned earlier before, Barbara, peace isn't just the absence of war. Peace is how we treat the climate. Peace is how we treat education. Peace starts when we don't approach our education by teaching bullies about the culture of peace and what it means to be a peaceful person. And so in all the aspects of the 9 corridors of our virtual exposition, we have these visuals which we're going to project into the world, not of the culture of war, but of the culture of peace, what
And
it looks
that's
like.
exactly why we had Ambassador Chaudhry on today, because he is a leader when it comes to the culture of peace. And each one of you today, Ambassador Chaudhry, would you like to respond to Jerry?
Yes, I would like to say, but before that, let me welcome my colleague and friend, Ambassador Shafiullah, who has joined us from Bangladesh. And so I understand that Bangladesh is now end of Ramadan, and he would be busy with the welcoming ceremonies in Eid. But I'm very grateful to him. We have been colleagues for many, many years, and he has joined us. He is himself an activist for peace.
Mohammed, unmute yourself. We'd love to hear a couple words from you.
And let me also mention that that peace is not only the absence of war, as Ms. Muller mentioned, but also we have to ensure that peace means end of discrimination, end of prejudice, end of hatred. All these things have to go away. Then the society we can say we have peace. It's not peace between 2 countries or sort of peace agreement between 2 countries. It is in the minds of men. When I say men, I mean men and women, but in terms of perpetration of violence, it is mostly men who create problem.
Well, Ambassador Chaudhry, we did a conference, and the conference was, how do you go from linear thinking, little tiny squares, to global thinking, to end war? You know what the answer was when we had 100 world leaders meet for 7 days, and Jerry and Desmond were part of this? We need mentors. And that's why I do peacepodcast.org. And that's why I invited Ambassador Chaudhry here, because he is our mentor. Mentors change the image of the world. They change our thinking. We go from linear thinking to global thinking by mentors. If you need to be inspired, or your grandchildren need to be inspired, go to Peace Podcast and listen to a 15-minute. Listen to Helen Peacock, who's on here. She'll tell you what you need to do. Listen to Julie. Listen to Sandy. I mean, they're all interviewed on Peace Podcast. Now, I'm going to go right to our Bangladesh expert. Tell us all about your life, Mohammed, and welcome.
Didn't persist.
Your turn now, Mohammed. Would you say a few words about peace, please? You're unmuted. You're fine.
Thank you. Can you listen to me?
We sure hear you. Yes.
Thank you for the kind words of Ambassador Honorable Karim Chaudhry, my university classmate and subsequently colleague for several decades. Well, its dedication to the cause of peace and its contribution at the UN and the global level is very much encouraging for Bangladeshi people. Because we ourselves struggle for peace in many ways in our short 50 years. So, Honorable Chaudhry is our representative at UN for many years, and he has now belonged to the world, not to only Bangladesh, because he's spreading a message of culture of peace throughout the world for the benefit of the mankind. So we wish him all success, and we are with him. And I think all the right-thinking people of the world are with him, and the people really want peace. Only the armed merchants, they like to disturb peace for their own end, selfish end. But otherwise, all the people of the world, common people of the world, they want peace. And I wish Ambassador Anwar Karim Chaudhary and others to continue their work, and we are with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask Douglas Roach. Douglas Roach, this is our second episode. And if you've been looking at the chat, I am going to record the chat and I will send a copy of whatever you need. I'll put it in either in the snail mail or else an email. And I want to have Douglas Roach give us a couple of words. Now, Douglas Roach was started with episode 1. He brought us into this moment when we can learn from the wars that Robert experienced. We can't let history keep repeating itself. And so we need each of us to understand that. Douglas, give us a couple of comments, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. And I'd like to first congratulate and thank Ambassador Chaudhary for his, once again, inspirational address. And it's easy to see why his steadfast courage in maintaining the values and exposition of a culture of peace continues to animate all those that he touches. So thank you, Ambassador. I'd like to turn for one moment to the present war in Ukraine. And we see now a resumption of the culture of war. As a matter of fact, I would say that the Western states are now driven by a war fever. And that whereas we might say for the last 15 or 20 years, we have been gradually moving forward in public thinking to the ideas that are found within a culture of peace, particularly ideas of nonviolence and non-war and through education and many other aspects. But there has been this resumption of the power of the military-industrial complex in driving the processes of war. This has overtaken the ideas of a culture of peace and discouraged many. But I think that as we now mark the 40th anniversary of the first edition of the Paul Bay Commission report on common security, a new report has just been issued that offers us new principles for an approach, a governmental approach to common security. Do you think that somehow we can break through this cascade of calls for more militarism and to get the ideas of the only way that we can live on this planet is not through confrontation, but through a common approach to security in which everybody's security has to be taken into account, and that we can find a way out of the present Ukraine war into a negotiated solution that will recover some aspects of justice and the protection of vulnerable people. Thank you.
Ambassador Chaudhary, would you like to say something?
Yes, of course. This is a wonderful comment, Ambassador Roche. This is what is primary in all of our minds, that who believe that, because it is now said, the biggest winner in the Russian invasion of Ukraine are the arms merchants. They are selling arms like anything. We have money for the arms, but we don't have money for the social welfare programs for the people. So that is a big problem. And then this militarization and militarism are the worst scourges of humanity. It not only takes peace away from us, but it also destroys the planet in a big way. So I will, in response to Ambassador Roach's point, I would say that this is soon after the decade was declared in the UN for the culture of peace. I spoke at a Security Council meeting on maintenance of peace and security and post-conflict peace building. There I implored that international peace and security can be best strengthened not by action of states alone, but by men and women through the inculcation of the culture of peace and nonviolence in every human being and every sphere of our activities. The objective of the culture of peace is the empowerment of the people. So that is, I believe, what is important. People have to value peace. They have to understand that we can contribute. It is, each one of us can do that. It is not something that should be left to the diplomats or politicians or generals. So that is very important. And this opportunity, just one more point. This opportunity could have been achieved by us or opened before us if we, means the United Nations, had intervened much earlier. End of February should have been when Antonio Guterres should have been in Moscow and Kyiv. That is when he should have done. Not now, when people have, the countries have taken their position in a big way. So that is the Pandora's box, which has been opened now, is very difficult to contain. And he is now only talking about humanitarian corridor for civilians, which is, we don't need a Secretary General for that.
Ambassador Chaudhry, we want you to be on that soapbox all day, but I'm going to mention something. I happen to be on a very small, intimate committee. This committee is made up of Julie Johnson. It is made up of Helen Peacock, Sanford Hinden, and myself. We meet every single week. One of the meetings was, we always are working on prevention of war and peace for the planet. Julie Johnson said, just out of the clear blue sky, we need a mutually assured survival. Mutually assured survival. It doesn't say no war. It doesn't say hunger. It says mutually assured survival, MAS. Sandy Hinden has put together ELMAS, ELMAS.world. The world needs mutually assured survival. Every living thing from nature to the tiniest little insect. Robert Mueller said we are losing a species every hour. Just think how many species are disappearing who depend on us, the humans, to not destroy them. So mutually assured survival.org or elmas.world. And we're going to have a conference in June, and I think it's June 12th, if I'm not mistaken, and we hope you all join us. Now, I'm going to give a little commercial. Next month, we're going to do Chapter 3, same Zoom link, first Sunday of the month, and it's all about education, Ambassador, just what you're talking about. And we're going to have Yasmin, who is the UNICEF's leader of education, on, Yasmin Sheriff, who's going to be on next June 5th, I think it is. Let me look at my calendar. I don't want to lead you wrong. June 5th, correct. June 5th at 9:00. And the whole emphasis is Chapter 3 and education. With that, Ambassador Chaudhry, you're next.
No, I was saying that Yasmin has already been part of your series of podcasts. I listened to her.
You did you saw her on podcast, Peace Podcast. You see, even Ambassador Chaudhry goes to peacepodcast.org. So do listen. In 15 minutes, you're going to be inspired to do something beyond your wildest dreams. I see a hand up from Jerry Schwartz, please. Or is it Desmond? I don't know which. This is a couple that you're going to want to remember forever. The Visioneers started by Jerry and Desmond. Desmond, please.
Yeah, Barbara, I would like to bring us back to the book for a moment and pay a tribute to Douglas Gillies, who I don't think is on the call, but I think his writing in this chapter is absolutely brilliant in the way that he showed the conflictual mindset of the European countries at the beginning of the First World War and afterwards. And he showed how Robert's family was brought up in that culture of conflict.
Yes.
So the point, I think, being made so effectively was that these people literally had war written into their blood. And so, which underlines the enormous accomplishment of Robert, born into that culture of blood, born into that culture of war, how he was able to transcend that. So I just wanted to pay tribute to Douglas's writing, because I think it's absolutely brilliant.
And I want to thank you for that, Desmond, because Douglas is moving right now and he's having trouble with his internet. And he sent me a text and said he's trying to get on, but he hasn't been able to. Douglas Gillies was also on episode number 1, and you'll get to hear from him. And those of you who are for the first time, I want you to know how Douglas Gillies, a lawyer, a court-appointed lawyer, was able to interview Robert in a way that said, now what happened exactly at this time in this moment? And that's why this chapter is so live with it's. And Julie Johnson said that he brings things to life. Douglas Gillies was able to bring that war right into our heart and to show us what it's like to experience war. And so with that, I'm going back to Dr. Chaudry. I mean, I always call you doctor because you remind me of a doctor, Ambassador Chaudry. Please, your turn.
I think I would agree 100% that as I read chapter 2, again, I was so touched by the way elaboration was made. And I was thinking, Treaty of Versailles and all these things remind me of the current world, and how the European countries were behaving with each other and apportioning the world as if they are to be taken away by war or by force. And there is a kind of a booty to be taken after the war is over. The victor countries take over whatever they get. So that is true. But I would recommend to all of you to read those chapters and the book as a whole again and again. I think it is.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Chaudry. And Laurie Marshall, please.
I want to thank Ambassador Chaudry for your decades of work for peace. I'm so inspired and humbled. I also want to emphasize that human beings learn through the arts. We learn through story. We learn through imagery. We learn through music. We come from a village for hundreds of thousands of years, we lived in a village where we all sang together and danced together and shared our stories and ate our food. And the idea of projecting images of peace, that peace is possible, is brilliant, you visioneers. And I'm inviting the whole world to make a painting together through the Singing Tree Mural Project. And I'm wondering, Barbara, if you might be able to share the 1.5-minute movie of the Singing Tree for Ukraine's strength and freedom. And this is a project that is rooted in nature. It's rooted in the mutualism of trees and forests. And we need to harness the media like we never have before and coalesce every actor and celebrity that believes peace is possible and make stories that peace is possible. Rivera's son has written a series of young adult novels that are as good as Harry Potter, only the magic is nonviolence. And they're called the Ari Ara series, and I put their titles in the chat.
And while she mentions the chat, I want you all to realize you can record the chat. Go down to the little right-hand corner at the bottom of the chat screen. There's 3 dots. Click on the dot, and then you will be able to understand why Laurie is so passionate. She has the Singing Tree Project. I met Laurie because she joined the Rotary E-Club of World Peace. I have read every one of the books that she has written, but the one that stayed with me the most was the singing tree. And it was, I think, World War I. Am I correct?
Yes.
Tell us, Lori, tell the story real quick because we're about time is almost over. And I'd like to hear from each participant. Lori?
So Kate Sarity wrote the Singing Tree book in a story from her father, who was a Hungarian soldier in World War I, and his battalion crawled all night on their bellies to escape the Russian soldiers. And when the dawn came, after being through nothing but devastation and death and no life, one tree survived. And in that tree were birds who came from hundreds of miles, who were singing a song that had never been heard before. And our Earth is the singing tree of the galaxy, and we can choose to destroy it and each other or create beauty that's never been seen before.
With that, I tell you the joy of each of you, that you bring to me such hope. You bring to me such amazing thoughts and amazing work. And if you listen to Lori Marshall, she'll put her email and you can look at her singing tree video. You can look at the art that she has created. She has a singing tree in Ukraine. These are thousands of people who have made leaves for the singing trees. And this is just amazing. She's also on Peace Podcast. There's so many people today on Jim Handelman is on Peace Podcast. Each of you probably are there in some point. In Helen Peacock, David Wick, Sala Sweet, I got to get you on. Sala, would you like to say something? This is such an inspirational woman. If you knew what she does, you would say, thank you, Sala. Sala?
I would just say that in addition to talking about the horrors of war, we need to talk about the benefits of peace and attract people to peace. Because just being sad about war does not create peace. And we need to energize people to create peace.
And you know, you're absolutely right, because I have always said, what are you thinking right now? Are you thinking about the war, or are you thinking about the world that works for all? It's our thoughts that radiate out into the planet. A lot of people come up and talk to me in the grocery store, and I'm sure it's because I'm thinking peace, and they don't see peace everywhere. So just remember that you are the peace other people need. And Sala, thank you for your devotion, your wonderful joy at just being on the Rotary E-Club. And she's an honorary member. And if you'd like to join us, it's Tuesday night at 6:30. Joni, you're next to her, and I'd love you to talk a second about, she's the co-founder of Pathways to Peace. Joni?
Thank you, Barbara. This has been wonderful, and wonderful to be with Ambassador Chowdhury again. And Pathways to Peace has been working for the culture of peace since the beginning, and for 40 years with Avon Madison. And we just came out with a book about our work, which was finished just before Avon passed away. And so I'm grateful to be part of this wonderful gathering. Thank you, Barbara, for bringing forward the work of Robert beyond anything he could have imagined.
Thank you. Somebody said to me, Robert will never die. I think it was Ambassador Chowdhury, or it was Douglas Roach. Robert will never die as long as you're alive. And as long as we're all alive, Robert will not die. And the words of Ambassador Chowdhury will stay in our hearts. And I want to bring in one other person, even though I would love to hear from all of you, and that's Sue Zipp. Would you tell us about the event that's coming up, Sue, May 20th, so we can join?
Thank you so much. Everybody has been so rooted in my heart now. I appreciate each person's work, vision, and the fact that you take each moment to create that value. The program coming up on the 20th, Friday of May 20th at 9 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, so that we can reach all the way through Bangladesh before it becomes too late in the hour. We are hosting Ambassador Chowdhury for a rather unique way of presenting his thoughts on in a dialogue. He and I are going to have a creative, compassionate, and curious dialogue in the role of creating value. The Creative Educators International Network, it's CEIN, but it's pronounced SANE, that opportunity for us all to grow in our hearts and minds together. The creative educators want to, our baseline is from the Tsunetsumuro Bakaguchi, who founded the Soka Gakkai Peace and Value Creating Society organization as a Buddhist group. And the value creating education is the essence of how we transform those moments, every single moment, to create more internalized actions and thoughts of peace, so that we can bring that out into the world in everyday life without having to think about it so much. Kind of reminds me of when I was learning to do the dishes, and it took me an hour to wash dishes for the three of us. And yet now I can wash dishes and hold a baby under the arm and a vacuum cleaner in the other. We learn how to integrate our lives that work. And there has to come this transformation, and this powerfully transformative time that we live in now is available while we create the internal space of looking in the mirror when you brush your teeth and saying, I really love you. You're my best friend. And when we put that, you'll be like Barbara when you go into the store, you attract what you need and attract peace. And when you show with your life that it works, then it happens. And yes, we're up against devils because, frankly, I think I have a little demon on one of my shoulder and a little angel on the other. And boy, do they yak into my head. So I have to take that noise and put it into my heart. And what comes out of our heart is wisdom. That is where we need to come from, to cultivate our own wisdom. No matter how much we have now, we're continuing to unlayer that onion of our universal journey.
So you should be you should be a preacher. You are really motivating us to get our souls into gear. And I'm going to stop this with one more person, Helen Peacock. This woman has devoted her life to getting rid of nuclear weapons. Think about that passion. Helen Peacock, say a few words and help us get over this fear that we live with.
Thank you, Barbara. I find myself feeling very honored and privileged to be with this group. So thank you. And I also am smiling at the thought of being in the same room with you and Robert, which I know many people have, and I can't imagine the energy level that would have been there. Yes, I'm working within Rotary, actually, to ask Rotary International to endorse a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. But it's larger than that. What we're asking for is a shift of culture within Rotary, so that it doesn't just focus on building positive peace, humanitarian efforts around the world. It also focuses on ending war. And I have a sense of sort of insight that when the United Nations was formed to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, there was never a hope, not even a sliver of a possibility that it was going to be successful, because at the same time, the countries of the world were getting together to form the Geneva Conventions and the rules for war. And so here we were, from a consciousness point of view, saving succeeding generations and laying out all the rules for how we could conduct war. And we don't do that around slavery, for example. We don't say, hey, slavery is bad, but if you give your slaves a day off and they only have to work 10 days a week and they have the religion of their choice, then it's okay. No, we outlawed slavery. We made slavery illegal. I just feel so strongly that we need to outlaw war. So I'll end on that note.
And I'm going to say thank you and go to Joanne Dufour. Joanne Dufour was on my podcast. She's been on twice. I had to have her on twice. If you have not heard Joanne Dufour and seen her slideshow, it is time for you to get introduced to Joanne. She's the one who said the NP. What are the you tell us, Joanne. Unmute yourself, sweetheart.
It's all about the TPNW. That's the new acronym that we're trying to promote. And that means the Treaty for the Prohibition. And Helen has been very inspirational in the Rotary circles. But there are other circles as well that are working on this. The Red Cross has been, the International Committee of the Red Cross has been a proponent since the beginning, 3 weeks after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Red Cross went on, the International Red Cross went on the position that nuclear weapons should never, ever be used again, and inspired the countries of the world to be able to endorse them. But I was thinking back about Robert and the inspiration that he had on me. And I did manage to put together, when I was teaching, I managed to put together a series of his essays, which he was kind enough to share with me. And I used to put it into a book form and give it to my students, and then ask them to write him a letter after they read his book. And so I'd send off the letters, and would you not know that Robert wrote back to every single student a personal letter. And those essays are beautiful, and they're still beautiful. And I'm trying to think maybe we can do something with him for his 100th birthday, because it's all about education.
Yeah. And you also did the Nobel laureates. You've got to start a blog with us. We got to go to your blog. What's your blog?
I was doing it with Unitarians, and they discontinued it. So I'll have to start a new one.
Oh, well, that's okay. But you know, that's who Robert was. And I'm going to give you the last word, Ambassador Chaudhry, but I'm going to tell you one last trick. He never stopped writing letters. I don't care who you were. If you were a child in the kindergarten and you made a picture, he wrote you a letter. If you were Sandy Hinden and you were going through a divorce, he wrote you a letter. It doesn't matter. And what did Sandy Hinden do? He wrote seven. What is it, Sandy? What's the name of your book? Unmute.
7 Keys to Love, opening love's door to joy and well-being.
Filled with Robert's letters, filled with Sandy's pain and his pleasures and his joys. Sandy convened us together, and we are mutually assured survival. And I thank each of you. Ambassador Chaudhry, would you give us a final blessing and a final word? And you're a little muted.
Unmute.
Ambassador Chaudhry is amazing, but Ambassador Chaudhry, we'd like to thank you, but we'd like a word from you.
Okay, thank you so much. Firstly, about the writing of letters. Last month, I was speaking at a class in the Columbia Teachers College, and the Zoom link got disrupted. And many of the students who were ready to ask me, this was about women's equality of participation. And they said, we lost the opportunity. So I told the teacher, I can come back. But I think she has her own programs. This is Dr. Judy Kuriansky. You might know her also. But then I said, if I have all the questions and the names of the students, but I don't know their email, if you give me, I will write individually to all of them to answer their question. She is yet to come back. I think she was challenged by my enthusiasm, I think. But I would like to say one more thing in regard to what Ms. Peacock and Ms. Dufour said about the nuclear weapons. Let me say, in this month, next week will be the Mother's Day. Mother's Day in the United States, particularly. The Mother's Day was initiated as a day of peace in 1870 by a person named Julia Ward Howe, Howe. And she issued that day a proclamation for peace, because this day was supposed to honor and to show solidarity with the women who lost their sons, husbands in the American Civil War. And that was it. And then after 40 years of that, the US Congress decided to recognize Mother's Day in 1914. And the relevance of my comment is, in 1992, the women had one of the biggest meetings at the University of California against nuclear weapons. That was an enormous success, and I think the biggest ever gathering for peace by women in support of against nuclear weapons. So that is wonderful, and I keep on telling this story every Mother's Day to say that don't forget, this was also started for peace, and this was initiated by women. And that is wonderful. And if you see, if you read the proclamation, you will see every line is like it is talking about the future United Nations.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, beautiful. They say every dispute should be resolved amicably. Every effort should be made to promote peace and to abolish nuclear weapons. Beautiful. So that is one thing. The final thing I wanted to mention is that I think it's very important for us to prepare our educational curriculum as Robert did in
the World Core Curriculum.
Yes, curriculum. But I think it's important for all the educational efforts to prepare our young minds to become a true global citizen, that they should feel connected. And I think who spoke about the music and trees, Laurie, I think. So I would like to say that I always, in my course on culture of peace, I always say that more you know about the other country, more peaceful you are. Oh. You have to know their societies, know their countries. It may be farthest away, but today, in day of internet, you can reach out. Whatever you want to know about every country. More you know about other countries, less you become violent. Because I think the distance and the difference that we perceive with other cultures, other societies is a bad element to get rid of. Because I think the fear of difference, the dislike for difference is very dangerous.
It is.
We have to say that everybody has the same, we are same human beings, oneness of humanity, something which should be internalized by all of us. We are not we and them, we are we as a whole. And so that is the important point that I want to make. Know about more countries, feel less violent about the world issues. Thank you.
Now, thank you, Ambassador Chaudhry. Now, you know that Ambassador Chaudhry has given you a whole list of ideas that you can implement. You can be the peace other people need. You can be the peace our planet needs. And so if you have an idea that you would like to share, be sure you send it to me. I would be delighted to put it into a chat in another way. But I want you to know that we're going to have this recording on peacepodcast.org. Go to the blog and you will see Ambassador Chaudhry's. In about 2 or 3 days, we'll have Ambassador Chaudhry up. His whole talk will be there. Have a time with your family. Have them sit down and maybe listen once in a while to some of the words that Ambassador Chaudhry said. You don't have to watch the whole hour at one time. Do 15 minutes now and 15 minutes again and have that conversation. And I thank you, Ambassador Chaudhry. You are such a blessing to our planet today. I always said when Robert was around, I said, Robert, I'm going to keep you alive as long as I can, because when you're on the planet, we're going to have peace. Ambassador Chaudhry, I give you that halo. As long as you're on the planet, we're going to have peace. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I go back and let's all give him a round of applause and tell him how much we appreciate never giving up. Thank you for never giving up.
Yes.
That's what Robert always said, never, never give up. With that, I'm Barbara Gahn-Mueller, and you should have been in some of our conversations, Robert and I and Diane Ruth, and some of these people who are lifelong friends. We know what it was like. Some go in the other room sometime, it got too much, but that's okay. That's us. Love you, love you, love you. May peace prevail on earth.